for wearing a shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Make it
All right. We're now live on YouTube. So please do your local welcomes, and then we'll kick off at 6. So Dave, you're ready at 6.
Cool. Well, seeing as we're talking, yeah, we'll just do. So our in-house welcomes. I guess so.
All right, we're waiting with bated breath. Somebody on the YouTube stream? Yep, you're on the YouTube stream. Cool. All right, I thought that intro would take longer. I feel like I need to tell a joke or something, but I won't, because it would honestly be the worst possible joke in the world. So, Dave nodding. Thank you, Dave.
Anthony, what if I did you a would you rather? Would you rather eat a tub of ice cream with frozen spiders in it, or would you rather sleep with a snake as a pillow for a night?
I'm definitely going for spiders. Mostly because that's the answer that my wife would expect to give. So, you know, if you've ever been to Beijing and you've been on the street in Beijing at the markets there, where they have, like, you know, roast deep fried scorpions, deep fried enormous flipping spiders. It's anyway. I mean, they do it for the tourists, of course, but so my wife would fully expect that to be my answer.
Very diplomatic of you. Well done. Look, it's just gone 6 o'clock, so I think we'll get it started. We'll kick off. Haramai, and a very warm welcome to everyone in the community joining us today, on the huddles in the groups, and everyone online across the motu. Welcome to Product Voices Aotearoa. My name is Dave Stratham, and I'm calling from Dunedin with the Dunedin team here. There's more beyond the screen. We're very excited. Look, we're very, very excited for this panel of speakers we have tonight. 4 experts ready to share insights about the world of products with us, from finding your next role, working remotely, to thinking strategically and even prototyping faster. Just lovely, absolutely lovely topics. We're going to do a Q&A live as we go, so yell out your questions as we go. Oh, no, of course we're not going to do that. We're going to save the questions until the end, so we'll wrap up with Q&A after the speakers have finished. But I wanted to encourage everyone watching online on YouTube, to share your questions in the YouTube chat. We'll grab them there once the speakers have finished. I want to, before we kick off the talks, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors. We are truly grateful for your support. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much for supporting us. Look, that's enough from me. Let's get started with our first speaker. Andrew Tokley is calling from Wellington. Andrew, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Kia ora. Away you go.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. It's our second one of doing these national events, so it's good to get another one going and to recognise what's happening across the country. Today, I wanted to talk about just the one question you need to ask at your next interview. I'm not recommending you all go out and look for a new job, but if you are and when you do, this is the answer you give when they say to you, "Hey, have you got a question for us?" Which all good interviewers should ask you, or give you an opportunity to ask them a question. One of the reasons I started my business as a product leadership coach was that 4 years ago I recognized there was this real mismatch between what businesses thought they wanted from product leaders and what product people wanted to do as product people. And this disconnect often got missed at interview stage, and people start their job and they go, well, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Everyone's got these expectations on me that I didn't think was the role of a product person. I'm just being asked to run Scrum and give them delivery timeframes. I don't understand what's going on. This is really bad. And they leave unhappy, and it's an expensive mistake all round. And so this one question that I think you should answer, that you should ask the business that you're intending to work for, should hopefully shine a light on making sure that you both have very clear expectations about what you're each getting into, and have really clear lines of accountability of where you should be spending your time. And so before you ask the question though, you might want to print this out, the thing that I'm going to show you, or you might just want to speak to it. I think it's something I've been working on for a little while in terms of how I frame the different areas that product people get involved in when they're working across a range of seniorities, from a first product role, maybe you're a product owner, right through to even a CPO. These questions, or these areas of influence that you have, I think are a good way to frame for a lay person who may be the person interviewing you, you may be the first product person that they've interviewed. It's a good way for everybody to understand, yeah, these are some areas that I think you're going to have an impact in. And the way I typically describe these pillars of influence is that on one end of it, there's building things that are going to delight customers, right? So you're going to be thinking about how you're going to design a solution, the scope of the solution, so kind of like go-to-market stuff. Well, we know we're building this thing, but which part of it are we going to deliver into the product first to get some initial feedback? There's going to be some delivery reality to keep people in the loop as to what's going to be delivered. Maybe if you're early to product, you don't have persistent teams, so you might be thinking about resourcing this particular piece of feature that's going to go into the product, or documentation, or supporting it. So very much thinking about, after you've gone through all the rigor of deciding what you're going to do, actually getting that thing, that feature or that enhancement in front of customers in a delightful way. So an absolutely necessary part of a product company, and product people are involved to varying degrees in this aspect of the product. The other one is the team, and you may be influencing how the team that you're working with, or the teams that you're working with, perform in order to create these beautifully, in Marty Kagan's terminology, these empowered product teams. And so you might be doing things like working together as a team on solution discovery, on the way in which teams operate, so efficiencies of the team, agile practices. I talk a lot about Scrum having nothing to do with product, but invariably you get involved in agile as a thing. So you might be involved in how you work as a team, release planning, road mapping, how the team coordinates what it's doing and its activities, and the various complexities of running a team, a cross-functional team, to deliver the value that will be delivered through the features to your customers. Another area of influence is how you align that activity of the team and the things they're building with the needs of the business. So there's this alignment that happens to make sure that you're optimizing the value that the team is working on towards what the business needs to have to succeed. So this idea that the business has got its own strategy and then you just build features and somehow it might make a difference to strategy. Well, in this world, you're trying to connect the dots here between the business and the product teams. So now you're thinking about which opportunities or problems are you going to solve that are going to help the company. You'll be developing your own product strategy to link into the business strategy. You'll be doing a lot more work with stakeholders to tell the story of attribution of why you're choosing to do the things you're doing in product, to reinforce what's going on in the business and what the business needs to have happen to succeed. You'll be getting evidence of that attribution of impact, a lot of impact reporting, and really highlighting to the rest of the business and ensuring that the investment made in the product teams that you're working with is going to the right places. And the fourth area of influence you might have is on the future. And this could be the longer term vision and strategy of the company, like in 5 years' time, want to land on Mars type stuff. Or it could be like, how do we want to, in the future, evolve our product culture? So you might be thinking about the hiring strategy, the budgets you have, managing the career development of the product people that you're working with or who you may even be managing. And so this to me covers a lot of what you do as a product person. And one obvious omission here, and I haven't quite worked out how to do this yet, I haven't talked about engaging with customers outside of discovery, but all of these areas involve you engaging with customers. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm just thinking you don't need to talk to customers, but obviously a big part of discovery is talking to customers, but it also goes through building features to really understand, showing prototypes to customers. That dimension seems to cover everything, and I didn't want to repeat it everywhere. But I think this is a really good focus for you to ask the question, where do you expect this role to make the most impact? Once you've got the person who's interviewing you to understand these four different dimensions, ask them, where do you think you should be playing most? And it's not like you're going to spend they're not going to say, yeah, I want you to spend all the time working with the team, forget about features and business and focus and future. What I suspect they'll do is say, look, I want you to spend most of your time understanding and connecting the dots back into the business, because I don't think the teams are optimizing what they're doing for the maximum impact for the business. And so I want you to increase the value that the team are creating. So I want you to spend a lot of time in the business, engaging with stakeholders, understanding our current strategy, building your own product strategy around it, and then working with the team and enable the team to do their thing. You don't need to be, we've got great designers. You don't need to be doing solution specifications and mock-ups and stuff. We think that's covered. We want you to spend, and then that might tell you, okay, well, they're thinking about a senior PM now. They're not thinking about the normal product owner who just needs to make features to get delivered faster. And so you'll find a lot of employers are employing product people, but they actually want a project manager with a big whip, and they actually want you to be working in the feature space, delivering delightful solutions, and that's their measure of success for you. If you can deliver great features that delight customers, that's all you need to worry about. And necessarily you have to align back up to the business, but they want you to spend most of your time ensuring those features are brilliant. And so what I sometimes think about, and this is good because you're not talking about the role name, right? So you're not saying, well, what's the difference between a product owner and a product manager and a head of product and a director and a VP? You're talking about the areas of influence. And I often think in terms of this as a spectrum of influence. And this is something you don't need to bring to the interview, but I think just rounds off this conversation, that I think the motivation for what you do is more output driven on the right, more outcome driven on the left. And so it speaks to the sort of influence you need to assert. And then you need a lot of influence to get people to go to Mars in 5 years' time compared to influencing, well, let's make that screen look like this rather than that. there's a different influence dimension to it. So you need to be at a different level of in your career. So product owners typically work down this end of the scale. Product managers do all of it right through to the business, and this somewhat depends on the size of your business that you're in. Head of products and these sort of executive product leaders tend to stay away from the features and teams. They enable teams to do all that work, but they're very much in the future, thinking about where the next big things are going to be. And if you're lucky enough to be in a startup and you're a product person, you're probably doing just everything and just trying to keep your head above water. So yeah, ask this question, frame it, and then make sure that the job's the right thing for you. Talk about where you've played before and where you would like to play in the future, and make sure that aligns with the expectations of the company that you're going to be working for. And good luck with your next interview.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic. Truly is the most impactful question you could ask. We're going to carry on through our panel now. Up next, we're going to zoom down the country to Christchurch, where we'll have Tanya Weisbrot. Tanya, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Kia ora. Where you go?
Thank you so much. And kia ora, everyone. Thanks for the invitation to connect. I thought I'd talk today about how we do the discovery phase or process of the design thinking process at Capital Preferences, which is a small fintech scale-up based in Christchurch. Let's get this thing going. Hopefully you can see my screen. Before I kick into it, I was asked to share something surprising about myself. So that's me as a young child in the top left corner when I was living on a kibbutz in Israel, which is a small socialist community. That was before my family moved to Wellington, where I initially worked in public policy. And over the last 12 years, I've transitioned from public policy to various product roles, including for the likes of Orion Health in Auckland and Auckland Transport. And now I'm at Capital Preferences in the beautiful garden city of Christchurch. I also love dogs, so I decided to put a photo of them in there. So what is this fintech company doing in the middle of Christchurch? Our mission is to build a world where people are deeply understood and empowered to make purposeful decisions with their time and money. Simply put, Capital Preferences makes it easier and faster for people to make big decisions. How do we do this? We use decision science and applied behavioral economics to simplify and humanize financial service experiences, including in the domains of investing and financial planning. So, for example, we help financial advice companies to more accurately reveal a person's attitude to investment risk, rather than asking them to tell us how much risk they're willing to take, be that aggressive, conservative, or balanced. We ask them to show us exactly how much risk they'd take in a gamified simulator. So that's the 20,000 view. We've only got 10 minutes. So I'll try and make it snappy. I'm sure most of you will have come across the design thinking process at some stage before, but for those who are not already familiar, the purpose of design thinking is to reduce the cost of innovation and get products to market faster through a repeatable creative process. I thought I'd just zoom in on the first and arguably most important part of that process, the discovery phase, sometimes referred to as the empathy phase, and how we implement this at Capital Preferences. So the discovery phase effectively helps us to define critical problems and opportunities faster. We've been refining our discovery process at Capital Preferences. Well, I'm sure we don't have a perfect way of doing it. We think we've made some good progress. So for each new project, we start with a reasonably generic set of questions, which we then tailor for each research project. First, we do our best to learn about the business, objectives, the context for our customers, how they measure success, and any constraints that are in play, including any regulations. Once we get our heads around the commercials and the regulations, we then look at our end users. In our case, that's typically financial advisors and their clients, people looking for financial advice. The questions we try to answer about those end users are things like, how are they affected by these problems? What solutions do they have? And what workarounds or hacks have they developed if there is an absence of any good solution in the market for the problems that they're experiencing? And hopefully, if we've done our job well, we should have a clear picture of the business requirements and any problems or pain points that the business and its end users are facing, how extensive those problems are, the commercial cost of those problems, which we may work into an ROI model, and hopefully we start to get an idea of the opportunities that this opens up for us. So in terms of process, it's kind of hard to explain it in a short talk, but for each new project, we usually think about what we need to understand before we decide on exactly the discovery research techniques that we apply. But typically we include most, if not all, of the following steps. So firstly, we establish a broad objective. It could be something as simple as, go find out about this known problem in your sector. For example, how does sustainable investing preferences get taken into account or not in the investment process? Just how big is this problem and what's the opportunity? When we start a new line of inquiry, we also aim to expose some of our assumptions and questions, as many of them as we can think of, that we have about this problem pretty early in the process. Then we will time box a review of secondary online research to validate our assumptions, find out what's already known about the problem and where the knowledge gaps are. We might, in some cases, also look at how other companies do things like risk profiling their clients. We don't put a huge amount of weight on this because we don't have visibility of how extensively companies test their products or what their success metrics are. But we do take a litmus test to determine if we're even in the ballpark of being able to compete. Are we up against a highly entrenched incumbent with very mature products, or is this a startup that's sort of similar to us with an MVP offering? We are really lucky as a company that we have a lot of really experienced folks in our company, including the former Chief Marketing Officer of JP Morgan and the head of the economics department at Berkeley, California, both of whom are founders of the company. So our network in certain regions is extensive, and we have a lot of experts that we can pull on and draw on who are open to talking to us. In other regions where we're less connected to subject matter experts, we sometimes hire advisors on retainer to make introductions as needed for our market insights. I realize that's a privilege not everybody has, so there's always ways of connecting and across LinkedIn and other platforms too. Sometimes we also conduct our own surveys. For instance, we might run a survey on how included women feel in the financial planning process when they're meeting with an advisor alongside their partner, how this affects their experience and loyalty to advisors, which helps guide our product design down the line. Once we know the end users that we want to talk to, be that financial advisors, mortgage brokers, investors, clients, female clients, whoever, we usually start by recruiting participants via a platform called respondent.io. We then schedule these one-to-one semi-structured interviews, usually between 45 minutes to an hour, and either we run them in-house or we commission an ethnographic researcher to do it for us. And these interviews are, without doubt, the most valuable part of the research and discovery phase. I cannot emphasize that enough. There is absolutely no substitute for talking to people about their lived experience. We try to include a wide range of people on our product team when we synthesize findings, because we often find different people pick up on different nuanced answers in the interviews, which are typically recorded. And then we use tools like Miro boards to look for themes and patterns from which we generate our insights. And at the end of that process, when it comes to reframing our insights into design challenges, which is kind of the stepping stone between the discovery phase and the ideation phase, we try very carefully not to reintroduce bias, making sure that we focus our design challenge on the problems to be solved and not couch them in terms of solutions that might work. When the most important job is to listen, we rely heavily on these types of interviews. And I wanted to just take a minute to quickly deep dive on what I think is our most important tool in this discovery phase. Now, I come from a Jewish family where everyone talks over one another, and I've had to unlearn some really unhealthy habits to do my job well. But by far and away, the most useful skill I've learned is to ask well-formed questions and then shut the hell up and listen to the answer. And 90% of the time, these interviews are where I personally learn the most useful things. The interviews help us to avoid groupthink, which you might get if you interviewed a panel of financial advisors in the same room or over a Zoom call. They help us to close our knowledge gaps quickly. And if you listen carefully, they often expose insights that can't be found in the data, particularly qualitative metrics like what people are thinking and feeling and how they behave in the real world. How do we execute on these interviews? Well, we do several things. Firstly, we build it into our process and we make time for it. Secondly, we assign dedicated resources to this work, so it's not anyone's second job, but their number one priority. We use existing off-the-shelf tools to recruit and schedule interviews. We ask well-informed questions, interview questions, and then we do our best to shut up and listen, so that we're not monopolizing the conversation with our own sort of preconceived ideas about how the world works. And we've become especially good at being okay with uncomfortable silences in these interviews, which encourages our participants to keep talking. So just kind of in summary, I'm sure that the barriers and breakthroughs we've encountered are not unique to us, but here they are in black and white. Platform costs are a reality of doing this stuff. If you want to move beyond testing your assumptions with family and friends, which is essential to removing bias, then getting real world humans from these platforms is a good option. The good news is that these recruitment platforms have become much more affordable and usable, including the likes of Respondent.io, Prolific.com, Amazon Turks, and these have all made our jobs much easier. You can also screen out career panelists, who are these people who spend a lot of their time, their spare time. They have a full-time job and then they spend their spare time on these platforms making a bit of extra money. But you can explicitly reject them in your recruitment criteria as well, which we found to be quite helpful. Getting the timing right for when you need to do this research work is also critical for those of us who don't have the budget to hire a full-time user researcher. There are many ethnographic researchers that work on contract, and we use these folks frequently. We've also had some success in upskilling our existing product and UX teams to run exploratory user interviews over time with some support from more experienced researchers within the team. And we also use interview templates and provide on-the-job training, which has made it easier to deal with sort of the peaks and troughs of our need for this kind of research. And finally, another barrier to our early success was just not really having a deep enough respect, I guess, for our customers' regulatory needs, which seems a little silly. But in fact, we actively tried to avoid triggering regulations when we did our initial research and discovered that they were part of part of the problems that the businesses that we work with were trying to resolve. So we kind of, we repositioned ourselves as the sort of thin sliver of the tech stack, but in reality, our customers saw us as performing a critical part of a wider client profiling journey and doing it well. So they asked us to do more, and compliance was part of that. So to address this, we eventually hired legal experts. And I think if I was to do this all over again, I think I'd probably jump on that bandwagon a heck of a lot sooner. So closing thoughts, if you remember nothing else from this talk and you only have the budget to do discovery research with family and friends, then I will leave you with these final learnings from our experience. Ask well-formed, open questions, shut up and patiently listen to the answer, and don't be scared of awkward silences. Hopefully I haven't gone over time. Oh, and we're hiring. And the dogs come to the office, so that's a bonus.
All right, thanks, Tanya. Oh, I'm going to have to bring Dunedin back in, otherwise we're not going to hear them. Right, you should be back now, Dunedin.
Thanks, Anthony. I asked about 14 questions there, which I'll have to save for the Q&A section. Thank you, Tanya. We're in the South Island. We're going to keep our panelists in the South Island. Up next is Damien Vincent from here in Otapoti with us. Damien, are you ready to go?
I think we can. Oh, I know what I've done. Once I add Damien to the stream, we'll be able to hear him. Hey, Damien, how's it going? Can you hear us?
Good. Usability testing in real time. I love it. Okay.
All right, you should be good to go. I'll shut up now.
Right, I'm going to put myself on a timer so I don't go over time. Damien Vincent, I've been in product management since around 2007, primarily in North America. I've been back in New Zealand for about 5 years, and I currently work at LT, which is an edtech platform here in Dunedin. And our ethos here at LT is to create, share, and inspire. But when we strip that back, what exactly does that mean? So our North Star is to make science easier, which is great. Our vision, as you can see there, is a SaaS product for science education that engages students and excites educators. And in our product dev team, we've got 14 team members, 3 summer interns at the moment, which is great. And we also have a really great global CSM team and a great global support team, which help a lot with our insights and discovery work. And our monthly active users this month are 43,000, just to give you an outline of where we're at. So the most important thing as part of the product team is that here at LT, we ship software every day. We do use feature flags that we develop behind, but we generally are releasing on the daily. So it's really important that we understand that we create business value by delivering customer value. And I think Turks had touched upon that earlier. It can be really challenging because you have your business KPIs, but the product team is about delivering customer value. So if you can make those two things marry, you've got the golden ticket. So how do we go about that? So as Tanya talked about, which was a great talk, thanks Tanya, we are very much invested in discovery. It's really important for any of your initiatives that you're road mapping that you allow time for discovery. It really is the foundation of anything that you're going to do. We utilize customer interviews. We theme our support cases to see points of friction. We also map the system as it is. I came into a legacy system. LT has been around for about 5 years, and it's really important if you're going to do a deep dive into any kind of points of friction for customers, is you need to map the current system as it is. So what's in our toolbox for that? So we've got user mapping, which we do often here. There's a little bit behind me that you can see. And that's where we map the journey as it is, and then we do an idealized version of what that journey looks like. And that can be a lot of fun when you're working with a team that's never done post-its on a wall before. But I highly recommend it. Even if it's a disaster first time round, try again. Then prototyping, which is the meat and potatoes of my talk. We utilize prototyping here, which really speeds up development and helps align the team on what we're trying to accomplish. And it also shows the business what we're doing, which they appreciate as well. And then, of course, usability testing. You know, you've got to test with your users, ideally before you launch. All right, so what we do here after we user map is then we also create a matrix. This matrix is based upon points of friction in our platform. As you can see, there's lots of different exciting colors here. Green is good, red is bad. So as we can see, there were several actions within our platform that took over 50 clicks to perform. And as an edtech platform servicing time poor educators, these were the points of friction we really needed to address. So the great thing about creating this matrix, which I had help with Liam from our customer success team, was to identify the real challenges our customers were having, which we found was making content, not only publishing it, but making it available to their students at different times, different sections, globally. So that was a real challenge for our educators and a real pain point for our UX. So that's how we then move into prototyping. We identify what the points of friction are and how we're going to solve it. So prototypes are your requirements. I'm also a recovering project manager. And at the start of my career, it was all about requirements, which were very feature driven, very output driven, and not outcome based. So it's really, really important to understand that the prototype is your requirements. I mean, you do have a baseline of what you want to be delivering, but put that in your prototype. It can be really soul destroying for your team to deliver them a list of features and requirements. It stops the creativity. And it's really important that your team has buy-in into the solutions that they're creating. As Tanya pointed out, as product managers, we bring the problem and your team creates the solution. And also solutions are easy. There can be lots of solutions, but trying to find the right solution can be challenging. And that's where prototyping comes in. This is what I call Frankensteining. So don't be afraid to Frankenstein things. This is like paper prototyping, post-its on a wall, drawing pictures. It can be a little bit intimidating sometimes if you're dealing with a smart team and UX designers as a product manager to be like, well, hey, this is kind of the direction we would like to go in, and to collaborate with your team. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's allowed to be ugly. It's just an idea. It's something you can throw up on the wall and at least get people talking about it. So what I'm going to share with you is pretty ugly. So this was our first Frankenstein for the solution we had on getting content to our students in an easier, less click-intensive way. So we threw up all sorts of exciting things, features that had been buried within the platform, and collated them into this one powerful view that we have called scheduling. You can see we're iterating on the calendar here. You pull in influencers from other platforms, pieces of UX you like, data visualization, all of that kind of good and exciting stuff. So then we handed it off to Mark, our UX designer, and he did our first Figma prototype. So as you can see, he totally stripped it back, which was great. And it's a very clean interface. And from this, we could go into usability testing with our customers, which was really important to get feedback in real time that we could iterate on before we even started building. The thing about prototypes is you kind of want to do something fast and get it to your developers so then they can work on it. But when you're dealing with legacy flows, sometimes your prototype can get a little bit bigger, like this one is. So this was our next iteration on the prototype, where we added in data visualization. And that's a great thing as well with prototypes, is you can just quickly change them and get it back to your customers that you've invited for usability testing. And customers also really appreciate seeing their input. Prototype your experiments. So what we saw in the data was that it took over 50 clicks to turn content off and on for your students, sections, lessons, and modules. You could be doing that thousands of times a day for your cohort, which was really challenging. So as a product manager, what we can do is we can get together with other team members that are into UX, and you can create these paper prototypes to get an understanding of how you expect something like a toggle, which is actually quite complicated at several different levels, to hand off to your designers so then they can also prototype that. So this is also really, really helpful. Interaction design, super important, as we know, in product. A great thing about prototypes as well, that then Mark could move forward and start layering in things like notifications, tooltips. How does that complicated toggle work? Why should a toggle be so complicated? We put in a different kind of toggle you could try, turn it off, turn it on. We added the lesson menu, all of that kind of good fun stuff. And then we iterate on it. More usability testing with customers. We can add insights on the click-through on our data visualization, which is super important. And we also iterated on the toggle because it highly confused people. And this is what we built. This is live. So when we first launched something, up here, you can see the schedule. We put a beta tag on it because, of course, we want to iterate. And so it's important that we communicate with our customers that this is in beta, use it, go for it, but there will be changes happening. And then also use your gut. Sometimes you don't have the data or the customer interviews to tell you what you need to know. And that's the example we had with the toggle. There was a lot of resistance around using a toggle, but we had an assumption that it was the right way to go for ease of making content available and unavailable for our students. Then test your assumptions, adoption rate, and also deprecate. So the great thing about launching with the toggle, which was a new feature, we could see that it had a really fast adoption. So you used to have to set availability through a card system, which was quite challenging, but we saw adoption of 84% of our users straight into the schedule view to use the toggle to turn content off. So that was really great to see. And as much as we love to launch new features, it's also important to deprecate old features and to watch what the traffic is on old features. If something is not being used, get rid of it. Measure and iterate, always super important. Once it's out in the real world, that's the starting line. That's when you can collect real world data and real world behavior. And what we found was that our interface was getting a little bit too cluttered. We had a lot going on, especially when you deployed the calendar. So this is where we're currently at. We've cleaned up the interface a little bit. We removed the data visualization and put it in this new tab called Course Progress, which is pretty great. And we added a student view. So the educator could organize their course and then go into the student view and view what their student would see. So the most important thing I have found with prototyping is psychological safety with your team. It's really important that a product team feels connected and feels that they have a say in the solution of what they're building. And as a product manager, you really need to be in the trenches. At least I found in my experience, it's best to be in the trenches with your team on the daily. I go through all of the stand-ups, so I know exactly what's happening, so I can report back to the business side. And also once you start kind of prototyping and the developers begin to trust you and engage more with UX, then you can really move into rapid prototyping, which we're currently doing now. Once we have our prototype built, now the developers have actually, they're developing in browser. They're developing in the dev environment in real time, and then we can release something within a couple of days. So that's really, really exciting. So, and that's it from me.
Kia ora. Thanks, Anthony, for bringing us back in. Damien, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those tips on how to prototype faster. Our final panelist for the evening is Rebecca Spears, and she's all the way up in Tauranga. Rebecca, kia ora, how are you? Oh, you might be on mute. I really like that that drawing you've got there, Rebecca. It's very cute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Away
Awesome.
you go.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Rebecca Spears, and I'm going to talk about remote product management. So from the perspective of my current role and previous PM roles, which are both in remote-oriented companies. So I'll just start with a brief intro about me. I'll look at what's working well as a remote PM, look at some of the challenges and approaches I'm taking around these, and just finish off with a couple of observations that have turned out to be unexpected benefits of the remote setup. Cool. So to introduce myself, I'm a senior product manager for a B2C fintech called Lendy, which has headquarters in Sydney and remote working across Australia and New Zealand. So Lendy's a mortgage lending platform across two brands, Lendy and Aussie, which compete in different demographics. And I manage the roadmap for the websites across both brands. So before Lendy, I was a product manager at Normal Swan, which is a B2B scale-up based in Dunedin in the lease accounting space. It's got a similar setup to Lendy in terms of remote working. And here I led the lease management work stream, shaping up a minimal lovable product on a new platform. And so I've been living in Papamoa Beach in the Bay of Plenty for about 5 years or so after shifting up from Wellington. And before working remotely up here, I did BA roles for Craig Investment Partners in Zespri and Mount Maunganui. And prior to that, I was in Wellington for about 10 years after immigrating from the UK. And I've mostly worked in banking and financial services, kind of starting out as a BA, did a bit of management consulting and a few years of independent consulting. So how to lead as a product manager when you're not in the room. I think ultimately you lead by being aware of what superpowers you bring to a context and then being yourself and letting those shine through. And I think when I lead, I bring quite a facilitative approach to the situation because I want people to feel engaged and empowered to enjoy bringing their own superpowers to our purpose. And I think my superpowers are I'm good at scoping, finding things out, synthesizing things into a practical roadmap, planning, coordinating, bringing the right people together to connect and help us make decisions. And to me, I can do this whether we're together in the room or remote, it doesn't matter. And actually, years before we all started working from home and everybody was on Zoom, I was leading product remotely on group voice calls in previous roles in situations where people were spread around the country. So the thing that's changed is that the tech's got better, so you can all be in the same artifact at the same time, rather than emailing copies around and saying, look at this prototype on slide 7 now. But I do think if you can, it is good to meet people in person at some point, like at the start of something big. So in terms of what works well for remote product management, I would say visual collaboration for sure. At Nomos One, we did a lot of visual collaboration, and Miro was used pretty much for everything. So like you've heard the expression, there's an app for that. Well, at Nomos One, there was a board for that. Roadmaps, discovery, story mapping, retros, planning, everything was on Miro boards. And at Lendy, we use Whimsical, which is a similar tool, and lots of the same things happen visually. So quarterly release planning across the platform team is done visually, along with ongoing Scrum and Scrum type updates across the teams. And in my team, we do lots of visual collab when scoping, using things like context diagrams to tease out assumptions on how something's going to work, and obviously Figma for prototyping and walkthroughs. So thinking about what are some of the unique challenges that the remote context brings to product management, a couple of things stand out to me. Communication can become very transactional when things get time pressured, and there's a huge risk of everyone having split attention and feeling less connected as a result. And I'll unpack these a little bit more and then talk about what strategies I'm taking. So on transactional communication, at Lendy, we're just coming out of a very intense few months migrating the Aussie brand onto a single platform after a merger and delivering a new website to the group systems. And in a recent retro, I noted I was feeling like, yeah, things had started to feel very transactional because of these time pressures, and others noted they were feeling the same. There's no physical kitchen to hang out in to have a chat about what's going on, and I'm sure everyone's worked somewhere where the most valuable conversations were those informal chats in the office kitchen or corridors, or heading out the door for coffee. And then on split attention, I think an unintended consequence of remote working, particularly where there's time pressures again, is people's attention is often split. They can be in back-to-back meetings. They're trying to keep on top of things like Slack messages, whereas in a physical setting, it would have been socially unacceptable to be doing all this kind of multitasking, and it really wasn't as possible to split attention the same way. And it can end up being cognitively exhausting and make the meeting connection time feel sort of a little bit unsatisfying, like you're eating two things at once. So in terms of strategies around these, essentially deliberately scheduling in some more connection time and breathing space. So in my team, I'm in the process of trialing a daily block of time where I'm just available on a Teams call for people to jump in and out as they want, and then ask any questions they've got directly, and we can have a chat about it rather than Slack messaging, kind of like a PM water cooler surgery time. Other things we're doing is scheduling time to look at messages and emails separately, and kind of setting the expectation that you won't necessarily respond to something instantly, but there's more time to connect face to face. We've also revisited the meetings that we need and made some shorter, and then set some more up as kind of co-create sessions. So we kind of have a product quartet of me, the tech lead, the design lead, and the marketing lead. And we have a weekly product sync with the heads of design, head of product, head of engineering, and then we have our own kind of couple of discovery sync sessions between ourselves in the week. And I also do a delivery sync with the tech lead and the developers the day before our kind of weekly grooming session to help give them some more context on what's coming up. And going forward, I really want to build in some more time for innovation into our 2-week iteration sprint cycle, and also the quarterly release cycle, which and having a bit more innovation time, I think by its very nature is the opposite of transactional. And then to help with the wider sort of stakeholder connection, when I was at Nomos One, I introduced a 15-minute show and tell slot at the end of the 2-week sprint as an open invite to the whole company, where my team would demo what we delivered and record it, and we'd put it on a dedicated Slack channel, the recording on a Slack channel with a few bullets for anyone that couldn't make it. And this proved super popular. People were really, really interested, and even the CEO would generally attend. Whereas previously the demo had only been an engineering team session, and it's kind of a similar setup at Lendy at the moment. So I definitely want to look at doing something similar for Lendy at Lindy for the marketing and our non-engineering stakeholders. So they've got that ongoing pulse of what's being delivered, heads up on what's coming up, and a bit more informal time to connect with us. And I think what was also great about that show and tell at Nomos One from a leadership perspective is that it was an opportunity for everyone in the team to get wider exposure and get a chance to shine. So I would generally do the intro and outro, and one of the developers or designers would demo something, or if it was more of a back-end thing that we developed, they might talk for a few slides. So to wrap up, here's my observations on a couple of things that have turned out to be unexpected benefits of the remote setup. So firstly, visual collaboration actually feels easier, faster, and more inclusive with the cloud tools. You can have multiple people simultaneously updating and adding things and building on each other's thinking. You're not physically restricted by space around a whiteboard on who's got the pen. And it's also much easier for quieter or more junior people to contribute and get their thinking on the board, which is good for diversity of thought and ultimately innovation. Plus, you never run out of space. And secondly, I'm finding the opportunity to work a little bit more async than in a physical environment actually does facilitate some deeper reflection and thinking. So for example, one of the designers loves using Loom to record a question or demo and message it on Slack for people to think about, comment on. And this kind of thing gives you more time to reflect on something before responding. And you've got that opportunity to kind of subconsciously process the inevitable complexity and distill your thinking into something more clear and focused before responding, rather than needing to react in the moment as you might in a physical workshop. And I think perhaps others find this too, and ultimately perhaps this has the potential to help us work smarter. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for your attention, and hopefully there's something helpful to take away from what I've covered. I'm happy to connect. I'm on LinkedIn, also the product Aotearoa Slack, and also check out the new Aussie website that we launched a few days ago at aussie.com.au. And finally, I just wanted to say that I wanted to contribute to this session today to help put something back into the NZ ProductTank community, because being able to watch these talks over the last few years while I've been living outside the capital has literally been life-changing and really has helped me get where I am today. So massive thanks to everyone involved in ProductTank New Zealand. And with that, I'll hand you back to Taz.
Awesome, Rebecca. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful talk. I definitely got a lot out of that, and it's really sweet to hear you giving back. Thank you so much. We'll kick off the Q&A session now. I think what we're going to do is we'll go through the various huddles that we have and see if there's any questions there, and then we might end on some of the online questions. I think, shall we start at the very top of the Motu Auckland? Anthony, do you have any questions with your group up there?
All right. Do we have any questions? Any questions in the room? Anything springing to mind? Oh, there's one question over there.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi there. This is a question for Damien. Your organisation also works with hardware products, I think, as well as software. Have any of these principles around prototyping, have you seen them be successful with hardware prototyping as well as software?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring this up. We have an initiative for interoperability starting next year, so a big consideration for that is the hardware we have in place as well. We do have a new release that came out this year, which are sensors, which are much more portable and great for the COVID situation that went down. And so we're one of, I believe, the only SaaS product that does sampling in the cloud. So it's a real point of difference and very important that we do continue to iterate on our sensors. So in the customer interviews I do for the team that builds the hardware, I also ask questions around connectivity, how they're finding our sampling panels with the sensors, all of that kind of good fun stuff, any gaps or challenges that they're experiencing, how has it changed their teaching, all that kind of good fun stuff. Have I answered your question?
I think that was great, Damien. Thank you so much. Anyone else in Auckland with a question? right. Yes, all good.
I think let's move on to the next centre.
Kia ora, thanks so much. Tauranga, anyone in your room with a question? No, you're all good? All right. We'll move on down to Wellington there. Lots of faces there. Hi, team. Anyone there with a question for us? Oh, I see a hand, but you are muted. You will need to wrangle a microphone. Or charades will also be acceptable if you jump up.
Or you can tell Suhail and he can type it into the YouTube comments.
While we give Wellington a chance to sort out their audio, I will take a question from online. We have a question for Tanya. How does the product manager and the designer involvement differ throughout the discovery and design thinking phases? Would you say they are similar or different focus?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Tux, I think we actually spoke about this when we met originally, so kind of a patsy question, but good on you. I've actually been reading a little bit about this on Nielsen Norman do a lot of really good UX articles, and they were talking about the overlap between product management and UX research in particular. And when they asked professionals in product management what they thought their scope of influence and activity was, and when they asked the same question of UX researchers, there was a lot of overlap in perceptions of what each did. I used to lecture in AUT in UX and UI, and I used to, at the beginning of each year, I used to ask my design students where they sort of saw themselves on the spectrum of like being quite strategic, researchy thinkers versus being quite UI driven and thinking about the design of, you know, artifacts and prototypes and stuff. And I think that there was about 50-50 that stood at each end of the spectrum. So it really depends. I think there's a lot of overlap between UX research and what the product owner / like more so product manager does. I think when you're working in a startup or a scale up like I am, it's all hands on deck, and it depends on who you've got in the team and what skills they have, and just kind of making the most of that. So when I first started 2 years ago, I was doing a lot of hands-on research and interviews, and now I'm pulling back and supporting the team to do that themselves more and more, and commissioning when I need to do that.
Yeah, cool. I was thinking, we talked about this a little bit before. There's a piece that happens almost before discovery, which is around focus and deciding where you're going to explore for opportunities. And I think product can do that with a clear understanding of strategic direction to say, well, strategically we're heading in this direction, so we need to hunt over here, and that can be a good aid for a designer who might see lots of opportunities but doesn't know how to prioritize which ones to start looking into.
Yeah, for sure. I think discovery can happen at various kind of levels. Sometimes your scope is really wide and sometimes it's not. And I think that's often an interpretation of the amount of risk that your organization as a whole is willing to take. If you have a lot of appetite for risk, then you can go really wide. But if you're like, you know, you see this one opportunity and you sort of start to see the connection between a product that you might already have and cross-referencing it to some other use case, then that, you know, that can narrow your focus a little bit.
Great, thanks, Tanya. That was an awesome answer. Thank you so much. As a product designer myself, I can totally relate to that connection. It looks like Wellington managed to get a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll look at them now while we're here. Sunil has a couple of questions, and they're both for Rebecca at this stage. So, Rebecca, I hope you're ready to answer some questions. You know, the first one here is, how does the situations where you find a mix of both remote and in-person team members, to elaborate on there, some of your team is in person while maybe you as the PM are fully remote. How do you handle some of those situations?
Can you just repeat the first part of the question?
Certainly. So, how do you, any tips or tricks or for situations where you have a mix of remote and in person?
Yeah, I guess if it's the start of something pretty major, like you're just forming a new team or like a start of a big program of work or something like that, if you can get everyone together at the start so they can meet each other, I think that would really help. I've definitely been in situations where people have been spread across the country, and it was the start of something big, but we did all have a couple of days together at the start, and it did really help because you just met people physically. And I guess when you have got that kind of mix going on, I guess you just have to be super clear. Like if you have got some people in the room and then there's some people dialing in or whatever, I guess it's just about being really clear about the intention of whatever meeting you've got and what outcomes you're trying to get out of it, and making sure that everybody's got the information that they need to participate properly. And that's just basic facilitation anyway. But I think if you're in a situation where people aren't actually there, that sort of thing becomes hyper important as well. Yeah, does that answer your question?
I think that's a great answer. Thank you so much. And if you have time to answer the next question for you, whoever's on that one. So we have a question here. It's sort of a two-parter, if you would. So the first part is dealing with meeting overload, and then the second part, working across different time zones. Any experience to share there for us?
So I work across different time zones, but I just work kind of standard New Zealand time, which actually works out really well because I end up having a couple of hours free of meetings at the start of the day, and then we just work the schedule that it kind of works out. Occasionally you might end up doing one a bit later in Aussie time, but most of the time it works out. So that ends up that can work out really well. And then actually, so we've got the situation in December where I've got quite an international team. There's people that have originally come from Singapore, India, all sorts of different places, and some of them are going back home for Christmas. And so we've got the situation where we'll have some people kind of working remotely from India and Singapore over December. And so what we've done is just kind of found some time that would be the best time in the day to have the sync ups that we need to have. So we've ended stand-up's now going to be 4 p.m. in the afternoon for me, but it will be a more sensible time. It's a mutually good time. And actually in Normus One, we had the same situation because we had developers that were in the Philippines and Vietnam. And so we just had stand-up at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So, and then that's when they were coming online, and any meetings that we needed the developers to be in were just in the afternoon, which actually worked really well as well because people could have their own focus time in the morning. So it can work out really well. In terms of meeting overload, I guess that's a perennial problem for a lot of people, right? And especially if you're working on like a really intense program of work. And I guess some of that's going to come down to the culture of the company. You can have the situation where people will just try and overbook meetings that, you might book out focus time to work on specific things. And actually what I always do is if I need to get something done, I block out time in my diary to do it. And there's got to be a good reason for someone wanting a meeting over that time, or you have to acknowledge that it takes time to do stuff, and therefore you're going to block out time to do stuff. And then if someone's got another priority, you're just going to, talk about the priorities of things. And in terms of like not having too many meetings, just having something as simple as book your meetings for 25 minutes and 50 minutes rather than half an hour and an hour, so that you've at least got a micro break in between meetings, so you can at least get a drink of water or something like that. And also just think about in Outlook kind of I think defaults to 30-minute meetings. Like, do you really need 30 minutes? I've done plenty of work where I've just booked a 10-minute call with someone because people have generally got 10 minutes free, and if you've only got 3 questions to ask, you can probably cover it in 10 minutes and it's job done kind of thing. So just being kind of a bit more strategic about things. And at Lendy, there's actually an exec focus on at the moment on ways of working. So I think we're going to see some new ideas coming in around that. But definitely in my team, we're just thinking about ways that we can work more async. And particularly in this next month when we're going to have people overseas, just starting to think about more of more ways that we can do that. And actually, there was a previous ProductTank Tauranga talk on working more async. So if you go back into the archives, I think it was around May, that we did actually interview a company that actually work across the world, and they're just completely working async. So there's some good tips in there for different ways of working async. Does that answer your question?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Great tips on meeting discipline there. We'll keep moving down the centres now. I'm not seeing a window for Christchurch, but maybe Tanya, do you have any questions for your fellow panelists just to represent Christchurch? No?
Do I have questions for my fellow panelists? I was focused on the next question that I was supposed to answer. I guess I'm curious. Actually, I'll throw one out to Damien on your comment about the prototype being the requirements. I thought that one got me thinking, because I think that's true to an extent on the UI side, but how do you then deal with the data requirements in conjunction with that and what's sitting under the hood? Like, I work with these really smart data scientists from Berkeley, and I show them a prototype and they're like, tell me what's under the hood and how that works. How do you kind of balance the two when you're handing over the tech to the tech team?
I'm very glad you asked me that question, Tanya. Thank you. So when you're working on large UX projects, for us, the prototype really helped for a shared understanding of what the expected behavior and the interactions were. So it was very UX and UI based. Now that we're moving much more into prototyping in real time, we're actually prototyping in the development space, we get to see what the interactions are with client side and server side as well. I don't think you need to completely throw out requirements. There's absolutely schemas that you have to appreciate. There's legacy data streams that you have to appreciate when you are having Salesforce, Stripe, and your platform all talk to each other. I definitely, when we worked on that integration a year and a half ago, we definitely wrote up a schema around how the data was supposed to look and where it was meant to sit. But that's kind of how we deal with data on the back end. But primarily for us with the customer facing stuff, the prototyping really helps. And as I said earlier, the developers pick it up and they build it, and then we can see what the interactions are and what breaks. That's why the feature flags are great as well. And that's another initiative we'd like to work more closely on next year, because it can be quite nerve-wracking doing a global release. We have pods in the EU, Australia, New Zealand, North America, Latin America, and we can develop fine behind feature flags, but then we have to like do global releases, which is quite nerve-wracking, particularly when you're doing these huge infrastructure changes and how many things you break, and when you've got 1,000 students trying to log in Germany and all of that kind of good fun stuff. So feature flag management as well. I don't know how I got onto that, but feature flag management as well is something that's really important. So we can also just release things out live and see how they interact for a segment of society in certain instances, and also iterate in real time. Yeah.
That's great.
But yeah, I'm not huge on requirements. I think smash them. Smash them. Smash them.
Awesome. Thanks, Damien. Hey, we're going to take a couple more questions. So we'll grab one from the chat, and then I would like to ask my fellow Dunedinites if they have a question. So I mean, there's so many good questions here. We're going to grab Rob Gordy's question, and this is discovery. I think this is for you, Tanya. Most discovery examples are focused on build versus buy or borrow. Do you have a discovery process that works for buying, assessing what to buy to round out your products?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a great answer for you. I guess that by nature of the discovery process, it's about innovating on things that aren't working. So you're inevitably looking to build something. You may, I think organizations who make the build or buy decision are typically kind of enterprise who are looking to like either internally, who are not primarily software developers. They are running a business. In my experience, at least, for example, with Auckland Transport, they were like, do we buy the a mobile app that can help people get around public transport, or do we build that ourselves? And that was a big decision that they had to make. Now, there may be components of that you might buy. I mean, if you're talking about multi-factor authentication, clearly you're not going to build that. You're going to buy that from Amazon or whoever, that's a service that you would buy. But I think there are decisions that get made about build or buy probably down the line by the tech team rather than through the discovery phase. You're like really looking for gaps and things that aren't really there already to be able to disrupt. And if that answers your question, that was kind of my reflection on it. Others might have a different view.
Thanks, Tanya. That's awesome. I've just asked my room here. We have a couple of questions. One of them actually relates to a question that's in the chat. So we'll ask that one first. So Tokes, this one's for you. It's sort of broadly, what is the scariest?
I was just typing out the answer because I thought we wouldn't get to me.
What is the scare? Our room wanted to ask sort of what's the scariest answer a business could give you to that question. Could you maybe quickly give us an answer?
Okay, I'll answer Cyril's question. So I was in the middle of typing this out. So I think it's a red flag. If they can't answer that question, then it's one red flag that maybe I don't want to work for you. If it was combined with other things that they said during the interview that you thought they have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing or what they want from me, I wouldn't want to work somewhere where they didn't have a good answer for that question or hadn't thought about it. And it probably does depend who you're talking to. If you're talking to the CEO who's never thought about product and has heard from someone else that they need to hire one and you're in the cultural interview or something, then maybe it doesn't matter. But if you're talking to the CPO or the product manager or the person who you're managing to, they must have an answer to this question. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that if they can't answer this question or it's a poor answer, it's a no. Don't work for them.
Great. It's great advice. And if I could sneak one quick question in for Rebecca. Rebecca, what advice do you have for drawing in a little bit more of those introverted remote workers and just making them feel included and making them feel heard in group sessions?
I guess it comes back to facilitation kind of tips and tricks, really. I mean, there's someone in my team who I think is quite a deep thinker and doesn't always speak up immediately, but they might be kind of like percolating something and then they're going to talk later. So if you've got if you've got a sort of spidery sense that people have got something to say but they're not actually saying it, then maybe you can just stir the pot a little bit and kind of like ask somebody, so such and such, what do you think about this? Or what are your thoughts? And then kind of actually proactively draw them out a little bit, because quite often those sorts of people have got really useful things to say, but they can't necessarily always get a word in, or they're not sure if they think it's a useful thing to say. So yeah, I think it just make sure everyone's like, just ask, just be proactive and kind of like make sure you have deliberately included everybody's views in the conversation, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone. We're wrapping up now. On behalf of Auckland and Wellington, we'd just like to thank their sponsor, ANZ, who supplied them with their refreshments. And I would like to just send a big thank you to all the wonderful people who make these events so amazing. Firstly, to our speakers, and then also our volunteers, and also all of you, the beautiful community members who came out tonight to listen to everyone. Thank you so much. That's a wrap. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be closing off the stream shortly. So thank you to everyone who joined us online. And we'll see you next time. Thanks all. Thank you so much to everyone in the room. I did notice some smells wafting from the back of the room. So it looks like there's some food arrived. I was getting like super hungry. So please partake in the food. We'll have some time to network and whatnot, basically until Amy or Marissa picks up.
So just really quickly, I might have missed it before, just in terms of bathrooms, if you just go downstairs the way you entered,